Thank you, Landis family. It's good that you're willing to do that, and thanks for leading us this morning. Okay, our guest speaker this morning is Millard Showalter, been here before. His wife Mary is also here with us. Millard is Doris's older brother. Millard has a ministry of giving readings, poetry, and scripture by memory, and has blessed and entertained many with a variety of programs, both humorous and inspirational. His interest in memory work began in his elementary school days and was affirmed in an oral expression class, now referred to as public speaking, in high school when his class was asked to do a program for the school. Over the years, he has memorized and presented dozens of pieces, and this morning he shares with us the life of Joseph as our morning message. Thank you, Millard.
Thank you, Ed, for that kind introduction. You never know what to expect when a brother-in-law like Ed gets up to give you an introduction, but that was very good. As Ed said, I want to share with you the story of Joseph from the Old Testament. You'll find this recorded in Genesis chapter 37 to 50. And I use the New English Bible translation for this presentation. Now, I should warn you that this takes about 25 minutes, and now that I'm 85 years old, my brain sometimes draws a blank on these long stories, so my wife Mary is here to give a prompt in case I need it. So I hope it won't be too distracting and that you will understand. You will, won't you? Okay, good. This is the story of Joseph, the son of Jacob. When Joseph was a boy of 17, he used to accompany his brothers when they were in charge of the flock, and he brought their father a bad report of them. Now Jacob loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was a child of his old age, and he made him a long-sleeved robe. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not say a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him still more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I've had. We were in the field binding sheaves, and my sheaf rose on end and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered round and bowed low before my sheaf." His brothers answered him, "Do you think you will one day be a king and lord it over us?" And they hated him still more because of his dreams and what he said. He had another dream, which he told to his father and his brothers. He said, "Listen, I've had another dream. The sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told it to his father and his brothers, his father took him to task. "What is this dream of yours?" he said. "Must we come and bow low to the ground before you, I, your mother, and your brothers?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father did not forget. Joseph's brothers went to tend their father's flock in Shechem. Jacob said to Joseph, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and the sheep, and bring me back word." So he sent him off, and Joseph found his brothers in Dothan. They saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to each other, "Here comes that dreamer. Now's our chance. Let's kill him and throw him into one of these pits and say that a wild beast has devoured him. Then we shall see what will come of his dreams." When Reuben heard, he came to his rescue, urging them not to take his life. "Let us have no bloodshed," he said. "Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but do him no harm." He meant to save him from them so as to restore him to his father. When Joseph came up to his brothers, they stripped him of the long-sleeved robe he was wearing, took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty and had no water in it. Then they sat down to eat some food, and looking up, they saw an Ishmaelite caravan coming in from Gilead on the way down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What shall we gain by killing our brother and concealing his death? Why not sell him to the Ishmaelites?" And his brothers agreed with him. So they sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. Joseph's brothers took his robe, killed a goat, and dipped it in the goat's blood. Then they tore the robe, brought it to their father, and said, "Do you recognize this? Is this your son's robe or not?" Jacob did recognize it, and he replied, "It is my son's robe. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." Jacob rent his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned his son for a long time. His sons and daughters all tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, "I will go to my grave mourning for my son." Thus Joseph's father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Ishmaelites had sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, the captain of the guard. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. He lived in the house of his Egyptian master, who saw that the Lord was with him and was giving him success in all that he undertook. Thus Joseph found favor with his master, and he became his personal servant. Indeed, his master put him in charge of his household and entrusted him with all that he had. From the time that he put him in charge of all his property, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. He left everything he possessed in Joseph's care and concerned himself with nothing but the food he ate. Now, Joseph was handsome and good-looking, and a time came when his master's wife took notice of him and said, "Come and lie with me." But he refused and said to her, "Think of my master. He does not know as much as I do about his own house, and he has entrusted me with all that he has. How can I do anything so wicked and sin against God?" She kept asking Joseph day after day, but he refused to lie with her or be in her company. One day he came into the house as usual to do his work when none of the men of the household were there indoors. She caught him by his cloak, saying, "Come and lie with me." But he left his cloak in her hands and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hands and had run from the house, she kept his cloak with her till his master came home. Then she said, "Look at this. That Hebrew slave whom you brought in to make a mockery of me came in here to lie with me. But I gave a loud scream. When he heard me scream and called out, he left his cloak in my hands and ran off." When Joseph's master heard his wife's story of what his slave had done to her, he was furious. He took Joseph and put him in the round tower where the king's prisoners were kept. But the Lord was with Joseph and kept faith with him. Nearly 2 years later, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, and there came up from the river 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed on the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up from the river, gaunt and lean, and stood on the riverbank beside the first cows. The cows that were gaunt and lean devoured the cows that were sleek and fat. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. He saw 7 ears of corn, full and ripe, growing on one stalk. Growing up after them were 7 other ears, thin and shriveled by the east wind. The thin ears swallowed up the ears that were full and ripe. Then Pharaoh woke up and knew that it was a dream. When morning came, Pharaoh was troubled in mind, so he summoned all the magicians and sages of Egypt. He told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for him. Then Pharaoh's chief butler spoke up and said, "Once Pharaoh was angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. One night, we both had dreams, each needing its own interpretation. We had with us a young Hebrew, a slave of the captain of the guard, and we told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man's dream its own interpretation. Each dream came true as it had been interpreted to us." Pharaoh thereupon sent for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. He shaved and changed his clothes and came into Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to him, "I've had a dream, and no one can interpret it to me. I've heard it said that you can understand and interpret dreams." Joseph answered, "Not I, but God will answer for Pharaoh's welfare." Then Pharaoh told his dreams to Joseph. Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Pharaoh's dreams are one dream. God has told Pharaoh what he's going to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of corn are 7 years. It's all one dream. There are to be 7 years of great plenty throughout the land. After them will come 7 years of famine. All the years of plenty in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ruin the country. The good years will not be remembered in the land because of the famine that follows, for it will be very severe. The doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that God has already resolved to do this, and he will very soon put it into effect. Pharaoh should now look for a shrewd and intelligent man and put him in charge of the country. This is what Pharaoh should do. Appoint controllers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of Egypt during the 7 years of plenty. They should collect all this food produced in the good years that are coming and put the corn under Pharaoh's control in store in the cities and keep it under guard. This food will be a reserve for the country against the 7 years of famine which will come upon Egypt. Thus, the country will not be devastated by the famine. The plan pleased Pharaoh. He said to his courtiers, "Can we find a man like this man, one who has the spirit of a god in him?" He said to Joseph, "You shall be in charge of my household, and all my people will depend on your every word. Only my royal throne shall make me greater than you." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby give you authority over the whole land of Egypt." He took off his signet ring and put it on Joseph's finger. He had him dressed in fine linen and hung a gold chain round his neck. Thus Pharaoh made him ruler over all Egypt and said to him, "Without your consent, no one shall lift hand or foot throughout Egypt." Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. When he took his leave of the king, he made a tour of inspection through the country. During the 7 years of plenty, there were abundant harvests, and Joseph gathered all the food produced in Egypt during those years and stored it in the cities, putting in each the food from the surrounding country. He stored the grain in huge quantities. It was like the sand of the sea, so much that he stopped measuring. It was beyond all measure. When the 7 years of plenty in Egypt came to an end, 7 years of famine began as Joseph had foretold. There was famine in every country, but throughout Egypt there was bread. So when the famine spread through all Egypt, the people appealed to Pharaoh for bread, and he ordered them to go to Joseph and do as he told them. In every region there was famine, and Joseph opened all the granaries and sold corn to the Egyptians, for the famine was very severe. The whole world came to Egypt to buy corn from Joseph, so severe was the famine everywhere. When Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, he said to his sons, "I've heard that there's corn in Egypt. Go down and buy some so that we may keep ourselves alive and not starve." So Joseph's brothers, 10 of them, went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not let Benjamin go with them for fear that he might come to harm. Now Joseph was governor of all Egypt, and it was he who sold the corn to all the people of the land. Joseph's brothers came and bowed to the ground before him. And when he saw his brothers, he recognized them, but pretended not to know them and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From Canaan," they answered, "to buy food." Although Joseph had recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. He remembered also the dreams he had had about them. So he said to them, "You are spies. You've come to spy out the weak points in our defenses." They answered, "No, sir, your servants have come to buy food. We're all sons of one man. Your humble servants are honest men. We're not spies. There are 12 of us, all brothers. The youngest is still with our father, and one has disappeared." But Joseph said again to them, "No, as I said before, you are spies. This is how you shall be put to the proof. Unless your youngest brother comes here, by the life of Pharaoh, you must be spies. If you are honest men, your brother there shall be kept in prison. The rest of you shall take food for your hungry households, and bring your youngest brother to me. Thus your words will be proved true, and you will not die." They said to one another, "No doubt we deserve to be punished because of our brother, whose sufferings we saw, for when he pleaded with us, we refused to listen. That is why these sufferings have come upon us." They did not know that Joseph understood, because he had used an interpreter. Joseph turned away from them and wept. Then turning back, he played a trick on them. First, he took Simeon and bound him before their eyes. Then he gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to return each man silver, putting it in his sack, and to give them supplies for the journey. All this was done, and they loaded the corn on their donkeys and went away. When they came to their father Jacob in Canaan, they told him all that had happened. They said, "The man who is Lord of the country spoke harshly to us and made out that we were spies. This man said to us, 'This is how I shall find out if you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me. Take food for your hungry households and go. Bring your youngest brother to me, and I shall know that you're not spies but honest men. Then I will restore your brother to you, and you can move about the country freely.' When they began emptying their sacks, each of them found his silver inside. And when they and their father saw the bundles of silver, they were afraid. Their father Jacob said to them, 'You have robbed me of my children. Joseph has disappeared. Simeon has disappeared. And now you're taking Benjamin. Everything is against me.' Reuben said to his father, 'You may kill both my sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my charge, and I shall bring him back.' But Jacob said to them, 'My son shall not go with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If he comes to any harm on the journey, you will bring down my gray hairs in sorrow to the grave.' The famine was still severe in the country. When they had used up the corn they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, 'Go back and buy a little more corn for us to eat.' But Judah replied, 'The man plainly warned us we must not go into his presence unless our brother was with us. If you let our brother go with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not let him, we will not go.' Then Jacob said to them, 'If it must be so, then do this. Take in your baggage as a gift for the man some of the produce for which our country is famous, a little balsam, a little honey, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the amount of silver and restore what was returned to you in your pack. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother with you and go straight back to the man. May God Almighty make him kindly disposed to you, and may he send back the one whom you left behind, and Benjamin too. As for me, if I am bereaved, then I am bereaved.' So they took the gift and double the amount of silver, and with Benjamin they started at once for Egypt, where they presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his steward, 'Bring these men indoors, kill a beast, and make dinner ready, for they will eat with me at noon.' The steward brought them into Joseph's house and gave them water to wash their feet and provided fodder for their donkeys. They had their gifts ready when Joseph arrived at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat there. When Joseph came into the house, they presented him with the gifts they had brought, bowing to the ground before him. He asked them how they were and said, 'Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?' They answered, 'Yes, my lord, our father is still alive and well.' And they bowed low and prostrated themselves. Joseph looked and saw his brother Benjamin and asked, 'Is this your youngest brother of whom you told me?' And to Benjamin he said, 'May God be gracious to you, my son.' Joseph was overcome. His feelings for his brother mastered him, and he was near to tears. So he went into the inner room and wept. Then he washed his face and came out, and holding back his feelings, he ordered the meal to be served. The brothers were seated in his presence, the eldest first, according to his age, and so on down to the youngest. They looked at one another in astonishment. Joseph sent them each a portion from what was before him, but Benjamin's was 5 times larger than any of the other portions. Thus they drank with him, and all grew merry. Joseph gave his steward this order: fill the men's packs with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver at the top of his pack. And put my goblet, my silver goblet, at the top of the youngest brother's pack. He did as Joseph said. At daybreak, the brothers were allowed to take their donkeys and go on their journey. But before they had gone very far from the city, Joseph said to his steward, go after those men at once, and when you catch up with them, say, why have you repaid good with evil? Why have you stolen the silver goblet? It is the one from which my Lord drinks and which he uses for divination. You have done a wicked thing. When he caught up with them, he repeated all this to them, but they replied, my Lord, how can you say such things? God forbid that we should do any such thing. You remember the silver we found at the top of our packs? We brought it back to you from Canaan. Why should we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any one of us is found with a goblet, he shall die, and what is more, my Lord, we'll all become your slaves. He said, very well, I accept what you say, but the one in whose possession is found shall be my slave. Rest of you can go home to your father in peace. Then Judah went up to him and said, please listen, my Lord. Do not be angry with me, for you are as great as Pharaoh. You, my Lord, ask us whether we had a father or a brother. We answered, we have an aged father, and he has a young son born in his old age. This boy's full brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children. He alone and his father loves him. Your lordship answered, bring him down to me so that I may set eyes on him. We told you, my lord, that the boy could not leave his father, and that his father would die if he left him. But you answered, unless your youngest brother comes here, you should not enter my presence again. We went back to your servant our father and told him what your lordship had said. When our father told us to go and buy food, we answered, we cannot go down, for without our youngest brother we cannot enter the man's presence. But if our brother is with us, we will go. Our father, my lord, then said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, he must have been torn to pieces. I have not seen him to this day. If you take this one from me as well, and he comes to any harm, then you will bring down my gray hairs in sorrow to the grave. Now, my Lord, when I return to my father without the boy, and remember, his life is bound up with the boy's, what will happen is this. He will see that the boy is not with us and will die. Now, my Lord, let me remain in place of the boy as your lordship's slave, and let him go with his brothers. How can I return to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the misery which my father would suffer. Joseph could no longer control his feelings in front of his attendants. So he called out, let everyone leave my presence. So there was nobody present when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Can my father be still alive? His brothers were so dumbfounded at finding themselves face to face with Joseph that they could not answer. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come closer. And so they came close. He said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, do not be distressed or take it amiss that you sold me into slavery here. It was God who sent me ahead of you to save lives, for there have now been 2 years of famine in the country, and there will be another 5 years with neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me ahead of you to ensure that you will have descendants on earth and to preserve you all, a great band of survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. Make haste, go back to my father, and give him this message from his son Joseph. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen and be near me. I will take care of you there, you, your household, and all that you have, and see that you're not reduced to poverty, for there's still 5 years of famine to come. Tell my father of all the honor I enjoy in Egypt. Tell him all you have seen, and make haste to bring him down here. Then he threw his arms round his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin too embraced him, weeping. He kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And afterwards his brothers talked with him. So Joseph dismissed his brothers, and they set out. Thus they went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in Canaan. There they gave him the news that Joseph was still alive and that he was ruler of all Egypt. He was stunned and could not believe it, but they told him all that Joseph had said. And when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to take him away, his spirit revived. Jacob said, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So Jacob set out with all that he had and came to Egypt. Jacob and all his descendants with him, his sons and their sons, his daughters and his sons' daughters. He brought all his descendants to Egypt. Jacob stayed in Egypt for 17 years and lived to be 147 years old. When their father was dead, Joseph's brothers were afraid and said, "What if Joseph should bear a grudge and pay us back for the harm that we did to him?" They therefore approached Joseph with these words. In his last words to us before he died, "Your father gave us this message for you. I ask you to forgive your brother's crime and wickedness. I know that they did you harm. So now, forgive our crime, we beg, for we are servants of your father's God." When they said this to him, Joseph wept. His brothers also wept and prostrated themselves before him. They said, "You see, we are your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You meant to do me harm, but God meant to bring good out of it by preserving the lives of many people as we see today. Do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your dependents." Thus he comforted them and set their minds at rest. Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's household. He lived there to be 110 years old and saw his children to the 3rd generation. He said to his brothers, "I am dying, but God will not fail to come to your aid and take you from here to the land which he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And he made the sons of Israel swear an oath that they would carry his bones along with them back to the promised land. So Joseph died at the age of 110. He was embalmed and laid in a coffin in Egypt.